So today we are learning Parshat Bo. And Parshat Bo tells of the last three plagues that God brought on Egypt: locusts, darkness, and the death of all the firstborn sons of Egypt, which took place at the stroke of midnight on the 15th of the month of Nisan. And God commands the first mitzvah to be given to the people of Israel to establish a calendar based on the monthly rebirth of the moon. The Israelites are also instructed to bring a Passover offering to God. And it says in the Torah that people were told to bring a lamb or a kid goat into their houses on the 10th day of Nisan, which would be tied down for 4 days. Obviously, this brought them beyond their comfort zone because the Egyptians worshipped Ares, which was the ram. And so when the Jews brought in these rams and lambs and goats, the Egyptians said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "God told us that we should bring it, and then we're going to slaughter it and bring it as a sacrifice to our God." So for them, that was really standing up and saying, doesn't matter what the Egyptians think. We have to do what we have to do, and that's it. So this is what they did as they were commanded by God. And then 4 days later, after tying it down, on the 15th day of Nisan, it would be slaughtered and its blood sprinkled on the doorposts and the lintel of every Israelite home, so that God should pass over these homes, it's the word Passover, when he comes to kill the Egyptian firstborn. The roasted meat is the offering to be eaten that night, together with matzah, which is unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. And the death of the firstborn finally breaks Pharaoh's resistance, and he literally drives the children of Israel from his land. And the Israelites left so quickly that there's no time for their dough to rise, and the only provisions they take along are unleavened. So let's talk a little bit about this first mitzvah. The first mitzvah that God commanded the Jewish people, now this is a mitzvah for the Jewish people as a whole. This is now something new on a new level, was that just as he was about to free them from Egypt and establish them as an independent free people, this was the commandment to establish a Hebrew calendar. And this first mitzvah allowed the people to make a relationship with God in time. Now they would be able to meet God in time. And so the lamb was brought, so first they counted the first day, Nisan. This is the beginning of the months, as we say. And the lamb was brought in on the 10th of Nisan. So now God was able to say, on the 10th of Nisan, every one of you is to do this. On the 15th, everyone is to do this. And so this was something new. The individuals, the community, and God had a date. Until then, their time as individuals and their perspective on life was controlled by the powerful Egyptians. As slaves, they didn't control their own time. They weren't free to think about time on their own terms. They just had to show up every day for their slave work, and they couldn't make plans as a whole people or with God, even as individuals. As slaves, they just were stuck without a calendar. To be truly free, they would have to learn to think about time, its purpose and meaning on their own terms. So this was something completely new. Now, most calendars in the world are based on either the sun or the moon. The Western world goes on a solar calendar. The Eastern world mostly goes on a lunar calendar. But and the sun is considered to be powerful and masculine, bringing light into the world. The moon is thought of as reflective and feminine. So we have a masculine sun, a feminine moon. And an essential feature of the Hebrew calendar is that it synchronizes the lunar and solar cycles. And it does that by establishing a leap year, because the lunar calendar has fewer days than the solar calendar. So it keeps moving around the year. And for people who have a lunar calendar, it could be that a particular month shows up at any time in the year because it's moving around the sun. But the Hebrew calendar, what it does is the first month, Nisan, needs to be in the spring all the time. So every few years, there is a leap year, which is adding a lunar month approximately every 3 years, and it closes the 11-day gap between the lunar and solar years. That means that if this Nisan, the spring month, is getting too early, starting to go too early, then a lunar count, an extra Adar is added, so that it'll push Nisan back to be in the spring. And if it starts to get a little later, then it will start to get earlier. So this is a system. So the Hebrew calendar is unique in that the synchronization of the sun and the moon is a central figure, a central feature, very important. So the way we think about time informs our attitude toward the universe as a whole. What is the purpose of creation? Does life have a meaning? Does time have a meaning? And having this calendar brought these questions to the Jewish people to think about. And the Jews' answer is that the purpose of everything is the unity of the sun and the moon, of the giver and of the receiver, of God and the Jewish people. So the purpose is to unite these opposites. Now, the brilliant sun symbolizes the consistent, powerful, and illuminating light of God. The sun is not, of course, God, but it represents God, light giving. The moon, shining in the dark sky, represents the Jewish people, whose job it is to reflect the light of God into a dark world. So the Jewish people, therefore, are subject to challenges imposed by this world, and at times they shine in their glory, and at times their light is hidden. This is how the moon is. The first commandment demonstrates the goal of all of the following commandments, which is to synchronize the sun and the moon. Every mitzvah we perform draws down divine energy, like the sun energy, and connects the light of God with the Jew in this world, uniting them and forming one reality, so that in the heaven above and on the earth below, there is nothing besides him. So the opposites are worked with, not considered fixed. Nothing is considered fixed here. God and the Jewish people, the infinite and the finite, the sun and the moon become unified. That's what we are working with, to unify these opposites. So the commandment to establish the calendar was one of just a few commandments related to both Moses and Aaron. The Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt to say, so if our calendar synchronizes the sun and the moon, then metaphorically, Moses, through whom the Torah was given, is like the sun. The job of Moshe is to shine with a radiant light from above, communicating divine wisdom with great passion and energy. So Moses is bringing godliness down into the world, teaching us Torah, God's Torah. Aaron is like our moon. He teaches us how to refine ourselves to the point where we could reflect the light of God. And Aaron understands that sometimes peace may be more important than truth. So Aaron is working with how to bring the Jewish people into right relationship with God, like from below, and right relationship with people. So both the word of God and the way that people absorb and reflect it are important to our mission. We need a Moses and Aaron, a sun and a moon. In a personal sense as well, the power of renewal is vested in the Jewish people. No matter what a person's situation is, he's capable of renewing himself. This moon aspect of our calendar is about renewal. The moon starts to grow, a new moon starts to grow and grow and grow and grow, and then integrate and become less and less and less. And then there's a new renewal for the next month. So but in our interpersonal sense, we also have this renewal. And no matter what a person's situation is, he's capable of renewing himself. He can penetrate to the godly core within his heart and find the inner resources to make radical changes in his life and his circumstances. Every Jew possesses a soul that is an actual part of God. And just as God stands above the natural order and manipulates it at his will, so too every Jew has the potential to rise above his natural tendencies and his habits and begin a new phase of personal development. It's very important. We're never stuck. We don't say that. We're never stuck because we can begin anew. As Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, you have to start new every day and sometimes many times a day. So we have this potential to rise above, to see what can I do now, and not feel that their habits prevent them from going forward. This is very important, this renewal, like Hashem makes the world new in every second. He renews the world. And we too can renew our relationship with God and the world. So our sages note that this commandment is the first mitzvah given to our people as a collective. And there's an opinion that claims that the Torah should have begun with this passage. The potential for renewal is of the highest priority. It shaped the identity of our people as they emerged from slavery in Egypt, and it shapes each person's individual identity as he emerges from his own house of bondage. We have to go out of bondage, out of habits that make people feel stuck. That's something that we must do. And so we need to know that we go out with freedom and that we renew and look at things differently. Just because we did something once or 10 times or 100 times doesn't mean we have to do that on the 101st time. That we can say, I decided this is not what I want to do. This is not what God wants me to do. This is not my person. I'm going to do it differently. Very, very important. So this potential for renewal is essential. So Nisan, the time when this commandment was given, is the month of spring, illustrating how this potential for renewal permeates even the physical setting in which we live. So when we see the trees budding and flowers beginning to bloom, we realize who we are and that what we have done is not as important as who we can be and what we can do. So we don't have to be stuck in the past. We did whatever we did. It's good. But now what we are going to do now is even more important because that is our next opportunity. We don't have to accept our present limitations. And on the contrary, our godly potential is infinite, and each and every moment we can exercise our capacity for renewal, changing our situation radically. So people don't have to hold on to what happened a long time ago. It's over. Can let it go. People don't have to feel hurt by something somebody said a long time ago, once or many times. We don't need to hold on to it because that enslaves. But when we have the freedom of renewal to say, I don't need that anymore. That was her problem, his problem, not my problem. And how they work it out is up to them, but I don't have to take it in. This gives us freedom to be really new. So this was the commandment that the people were given. And then let's talk about leaving Egypt, which is what happens now in the Parsha. Everyone has their Egypt, and we have to know who we are and what are our limitations. And we have to get up and walk out of those limitations. We don't have to see ourselves. We shouldn't see ourselves the same way all the time. When some people say, how are you? Same old. What same old? There is no same old. God makes us new in every moment, and God recreates the world at every moment. So there is no old. We are new in this moment. So when we see that we have limitations, we have to see that sometimes we're limiting ourselves and we don't need to. We have to get up and walk out. And then we begin to live with a higher purpose in all that we do. So we need to know that freedom is a process of transcending, of getting beyond where we were. And we do our part to go forward. But we need to know that God is with us in our process. Even when we take a small step, God brings us out and we go forward. Then it says in the Torah, and on that very day, all the legions of God left Egypt. And Rashi, quoting the Medrash, explains, when the time of redemption arrived, God did not delay the Exodus even for as much as the blink of an eye. So when God said, okay, now's the time, let's go. So it was in that time. And that's something that we see very often with divine providence, that we want to accomplish something and it's not coming together. And then when it does, we understand that that was really the right time for it to come together. So this is something that we need to know. But then what happened was the people left Egypt in haste, quickly. They almost ran out of Egypt. They baked the dough that they took out of Egypt into unleavened cakes because they couldn't be leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and they could not delay. So it takes time for dough to rise. They started to make their matzah. And if they would have waited another couple of hours, all the matzahs would have risen. But they didn't wait. How come they didn't wait? They had already been 200 years in Egypt. Why did they rush? They could have said, well, now that we're on the way out, let's take another couple of hours, let everybody's dough rise, and then we'll go. But we could think that they needed to hurry because maybe the Egyptians would change their minds and tell them, no, forget about it, you're not leaving. But how could the Egyptians do that after they went through 10 intense plagues? Was it realistic that they would want more? Even the Pharaoh had lost his own son in the final devastating plague. The Bavitcher Rebbe says it wasn't the Egyptians who were the problem, it was us. God wasn't concerned that the Egyptians might have gone back on their offer of liberation, but that the Israelites themselves might have hesitated to leave Egypt. It took a leap of faith for the long-time slaves to leave the infrastructure of Egypt and head out into an unknown wilderness without a plan for food, shelter, or water. That was something that was hard for them to do. And we'll talk about what does it mean, a leap of faith. So when the moment of the Exodus arrived, it was a dramatic window of opportunity. Now is the time, get up, get out. And if they hadn't grasped it with both hands at that moment, it's possible that doubts might have crept in and delayed the whole experience. But they did seize the opportunity. It could happen to all of us that we get comfortable in our little slaveries and our daily habits. And they might not be ideal, but sometimes people feel that they're a lot less intimidating than the challenges that come with new opportunities. With time, people could feel worn down, and what was previously intolerable just becomes accepted. And often people hesitate and miss out. It takes courage to grasp the moment and embrace new visions and horizons. See, it's interesting that emunah, faith, we could say it's above us or deep, deep, deep inside us, but it's above us. And emunah, which is above the mind, needs to be integrated into who we are, into our minds, into our hearts, into our gut, where we are able to go forward with action and actually out into the world. But when a person does not have that integration yet, like the people in Egypt, the Jews who were about to go, they just took a leap of faith. It wasn't integrated, but they took that leap of faith, and the result was that they went forward. And there's actually a line that we see in the Torah. I think it's in the Tanakh. I have to look for it, where God says, I remember the days when you followed me like a bride into the desert. I won't forget that. Because in a situation like that, it's like a bride getting married to her husband and putting trust in him, even though she has no idea what's going to happen in many ways. But God said, you didn't have a plan for food, water, and shelter, but you made that leap to trust me and go with me and follow me. And that's something that I don't forget. And there again is that masculine and feminine coming together. But we need to know that even though God took us out of Egypt, when God took us out of Egypt, we were never slaves again. Now we are still in exile. And the entire exile until Mashiach comes is called Egypt and still exile. But once God took us out of Egypt, we were never slaves again. So we have no slave mentality. We don't look at ourselves as slaves. We look at ourselves as free, even when sometimes the outside situation is not what we would like it to be. But we recognize that we haven't completely finished the last exile and that we will soon do so. But all these years, these hundreds of years, thousands, have been part of our freedom process. Now, the calendar supported the process of the Jews. Going forward became easier because God gave them specific guidance. Bring the sheep into your house on the 10th of Nisan, sacrifice it on the 15th, eat it and put the blood on the lintels. And that night, the last plague took place, and Pharaoh pressed the people to leave right away. So what God was supporting, now's the time to go. Go. And all the people who wanted to go went. And at that point, the people wanted to go and they went. Now, the Exodus was, so this is something we have to understand. The Exodus was not just an event that happened to us. It is the life of each one of us occurring again and again in our wrestling match with the world, in our struggle with our own selves. We embody freedom in a constant mode of escape. And the experience of leaving Egypt changed us, and we never stopped doing it. We continue to exit Egypt to let our souls live. Zvi Freeman says it in a very, very beautiful way. Freedom is a marriage. Freedom is the bond of our finite selves with the infinite. The power to transcend the world while working inside it. It is a marriage of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, soul and body. And like any marriage, it's kept alive only by constant renewal. Like the miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea, suspended in its state of paradox by a continuous outer world force. So we have to know that God is with us all the time, making miracles, making it all work. Yet in our exodus, we are granted eternal freedom, not because we were released from slavery, but because we were given the power to perpetually transcend. That's what freedom is, the power to perpetually transcend. In Parsha's bow, the children of Israel are commanded to observe the anniversary of the Exodus each year by removing all leaven from their possession for 7 days, eating matzah, and telling the story of their redemption to their children. So when describing the Paschal sacrifice, the Torah states, "So shall you eat it, your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You shall eat it in haste." So the people were ready when what does it mean? You shall eat it, your loins girded. That means having, like, people wore long robes. But it means, on the literal sense, don't take off your belt that lets it just go loose. Keep your belt on, which also means it's the middle of your body where you're getting ready to take action. Shoes on your feet, ready to go, and your staff in your hand, that you're ready to just stand up and go. And you shall eat it in haste. Eat, get ready, move forward. In contrast to the ultimate redemption, it's written, "You will not leave in haste, nor will you depart in flight." So we're very close to the last redemption, which will be the complete redemption. Then we're going forward to Israel to serve God in where we're all meant to be in our land. And that will not be in haste. We won't have to run out. And let's talk about that for a moment. The Jews had to flee Egypt because they were running away from themselves. There were parts of their personalities that had not been refined or elevated, and we're not so different from the Egyptians. Throughout the years of bondage, they had been slaves, and they had not had the opportunity to develop themselves. So at the time of the Egyptian redemption, they were not internally ready for redemption, and they had to accept it unprepared. So what does that mean? It means that the emunah, which it's like when we eat the matzah on the festival of Passover, we're taking in the faith. First of all, we're cleaning the house of our egos. No chametz, no risen bread or crackers, or no chametz, which means no puffed up egos. Instead, becoming more and more humble, no chametz. And then we eat the unleavened bread, which represents, among other things, but at the highest level, it represents our emunah, our connection into God, which needs to be more and more integrated. So we have been working on integrating it. At that time, they weren't ready, really, but God said, we're going now. Enough, time to go to Mount Sinai, time to get the Torah, time to go forward. And if they hadn't run, if they hadn't run out of Egypt, Egypt could have attracted them, and they would not have left. Excuse me. Throughout the centuries leading to the ultimate redemption, our people have been refining themselves and their surrounding environment, making everyone ready for Mashiach, making everyone ready to know that there is one God, and God is here in the world, and that the infinite expresses itself through the finite, with the finite. And this is our job to educate people to know that. But all the work that we've been doing in all this time has been purifying mankind of undesirable character traits. And as a result of our work throughout this long process of integrating that original faith, when we went with God out of the desert, now we are ready to live as free people. And that faith, which we experience at the Seder when we eat matzah, is when we touch that place where our soul and the essence of the infinite light are one. And this is something that's what we're working for, knowing that our soul and the essence of the infinite light are one. We experience this when we eat matzah, but this is a developing experience of knowing that our soul and the essence of the infinite light are one. So as we go on, we live more and more with this consciousness. And when Mashiach comes, we won't have to run away. We will accept Mashiach with joy and thanksgiving, and may it be now.